60's, child. Hello and welcome back. In this video we're going to be looking at 10 things that have been lost to the 1960s. Most of these should stay in the 60s, I know. Now these things aren't so much what's been thrown away in the past, but really just lost to that era. And if you wanted to see them, you'd probably only see them if you had a time machine like this. Some of these things just spark off that sort of fondness for the era, but some are quite shocking that they actually existed. But they did, and you can't change history, but you can look back at it and reflect on it, and so that's what we're going to do tonight. So sit back and see how many you remember. Milk tokens. You bought these from your local supplier of milk and you left them out with the empties so you could pay the milkman. The idea being that it was safer than leaving cash on the doorstep, and the milkman didn't have to carry loads of change around. As a kid, did you ever watch the workmen digging up the roads? And if you did, you'd have noticed they put barriers around them like these, and hung from them was these metal lamps. Now these were run on paraffin, and the workmen would light them just before they went home so that the traffic could see them in the dark. There was different variations, and these were used right up to the early 70s as I can recall, but in the 70s they started to use the electric battery operated type, and these once familiar lamps just disappeared. Now Britain in the 60s was quite a polluted place, with all the factories churning out smoke, steam trains puffing out smoke, houses all had coal fires, so it's not surprising Britain was quite a smoky place to live. Now fog in winter is a serious problem, but fog and all that smoke combined produced smog, which caused a lot of problems on the road, and it wasn't very nice on your lungs either. Yes, in the 1960s smog was a real problem. But luckily today we don't see that, and we have clean air apparently. But what I don't understand is, if the air is so clean now, why is nearly every other child got an inhaler? I only remember about 2 people in my school that actually had an inhaler. The rest of us just had bronchitis and was given a bottle of Benylin. That was it off the doctor. But smog is now in the past. Evening all, remember him, Dixon of Dock Green? Yes, Dixon of Dock Green is well lost into the 1960s, but you can still see it on YouTube and places like that. But what you won't see is a policeman using these anymore, the police box. We all recognise them as the TARDIS because Doctor Who had one and he travelled time and space. And the inside of his looked like this, but the inside of a real one was actually like this, with a table and chairs, so an officer could do some paperwork or maybe interview somebody. And there was a phone in there with a direct line to the police station for the public and the officers. Sadly, by the 1970s most of these disappeared off our streets, although there are still 1 or 2 around, like this one at Scarborough. Next up is the Golly doll. Now this little fella seems to have made a bit of a revival in the way of plush dolls, etc. But Golly just isn't as popular as he was in the 1960s. I will say, as a child I never really thought about the Golly doll as in terms of being racist and anything. It didn't even enter my head, it was just a black doll or an imaginary character in a story. Anyhow, although the Golly doll is making a bit of a comeback, this is the guy I'm talking about, Robertson's Golly. You know, the one you collected the tokens and you sent them away and you got badges and figures, etc. But there's no room for him in today's modern world, so he's been left back in the 60s and 70s. On a similar theme are these guys, the minstrels. I never really got this, why people were entertained by men and women dressing up and blacking their faces like that. I mean, the first talkie starred Al Jolson as a minstrel, but the black and white minstrel show was massive. I remember it, but I'd never actually enjoyed it. But I remember my mum and dad watching it, and I would say this one's more offensive than the actual Golly dolls. Quite rightly, should be lost in the 60s and 70s. School, meant to be the best days of your life. But was it? Because in the 60s and early 70s you had these, the cane. Corporal punishment, they called it. I called it bullying. I did have the cane myself a couple of times. Now there are some people today who think it should be brought back. I don't think it should be. I think we have gone too far one way and are too soft now where the courts are concerned, etc. But I don't think corporal punishment should be brought back into schools. I mean, it was so accepted then that even the Bash Street kids, their teacher had a cane and used to whack them. Mind you, they were a bit naughty, these lot. Even teachers on TV had canes. 6 of the best on your hand, sometimes on your backside. Pain and humiliation, that's all it was. They even kept records with the punishment book. By the end of the 70s though, this barbaric practice came to an end through people protesting about it, and having been punished both in primary school and secondary school, I can tell you it was no laughing matter. Rag and bone men. Yes, we still have some people who go around collecting scrap off you, but actual rags and bones? And these two TV legends were the most famous rag and bone men of all time. Now where I lived, we had a guy like this. He used to push a handbag around and collect the rags and stuff, and he used to give you a balloon or a goldfish if you were lucky. Later on in the 70s, 2 guys used to come round in a van similar to this, and he used to shout toys for rags, and what you'd get if you had enough rags was either a bow and arrow made out of garden canes. Now it didn't look like much of a toy, but to be honest, with a bit of imagination, it made you into a Red Indian or even Robin Hood. For the girls, they got a bat and ball, and if you didn't have many rags, you usually ended up with a balloon on a stick. Now in the early 1960s there weren't many cars on the street because nobody could afford them. I think there was one in my avenue when I was little. But what I do remember is these parking lights. The law required that you had to have a light on all night on your car when it was parked up on the roadside. Now unlike modern cars who have parking lights built in, them days it didn't, so this thing clipped on your window, you shut your window and you had to run a lead to a battery in the house. And if you didn't have one, you got a visit off this chap. Mind you, he didn't seem to bother this little fella. Now, last but not least, what we used to call the plastic pig. If you had a disability, the NHS would give you one of these if you were lucky. Freedom for the disabled, the Invacar. Play on the word invalid, which wouldn't be allowed today, but back then, that's the term they used. Other horrid terms like cripple, spastic, and monk, all acceptable in the day, but terrible words now when you think about it. I mean, you wouldn't see these outside shops anymore, would you? They meant well, collecting money for people with disabilities, but for God's sake. Anyhow, we've moved on from all that now, and they're left in the past. Although one did make an appearance in Brian Potter's Phoenix Club, in Peter Kay's wonderful Phoenix Nights. How sad he was when he saw his little crippled boy all melted when the club burnt down. Anyhow, back to the Invacar. It was basically a motorbike engine on 3 wheels. A mate of mine purchased one of these in the 70s, about 1977 I think it was, and drove around it. He loved it, but it looks ridiculous. And I'll tell you what, they couldn't half turn over so easily. You had to put something heavy over the back axle so they wouldn't turn over on a sharp corner. They were quite prone to setting on fire as well. And so eventually they ended up in the scrapyard. There are still a few around in museums and some enthusiasts have them, but good riddance to them, that's what I say. Well, that's the end of our look back into the 60s and 70s at some of the things that are best left there. So if you enjoyed this video, subscribe and like, and I'll see you later.